السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. So we're continuing off on this book of the Kingdom of the Heart, and without going into too much depth, we talked about how the heart is kind of central to our actions, and our actions can influence the state of the heart, and the state of the heart can influence the actions, so on and so forth. And certain avenues that we have, or faculties that we have, are avenues into impacting the heart. That being the faculties of the sight, the speech, and hearing as well. And today we'll be talking a little bit about sight. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in this chapter 8, chapter 7, the author talks about sight and inner sight. And he talks about how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us sight in order to behold the majesty of his creation and the various signs that he has placed within that creation. And he connects, and he says that the sight that we've been given, right, the physical action of being able to see, is connected to something that he terms inner sight, or basira, which is that thing that allows us to look and see and contemplate and reflect. Right? It's that thing that exists within ourselves, that is something that is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us to have divine distinction, right? To be able to understand what the haqq, to be able to see what the truth is, what the reality is, right? So, a heart that is quote unquote dead, right? Even though you may be living, you might not be able to appreciate the signs of Allah if your heart is darkened and if your heart is dead, right? And that's the inner sight that he's talking about here, is that if your heart is full of reverence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right, and it has that liveliness in it, you'll be able to see his signs and appreciate the majesty of his signs and be able to reflect upon the creation that he has made, right? And so he lists here a variety of verses that give us an idea further of what this inner sight is. So one of the selections that he chooses is that, but whoever turns away from my reminder will certainly have a miserable life. Then we will raise him up blind on the day of resurrection. He will say, my Lord, why have you raised me up blind, although I used to see? Allah will say, just as our revelations came to you and you neglected them, so today you are neglected. Allah Jalla wa Ala also said, but whoever is blind to the truth in this life will be blind in the hereafter, and even more astray from the path. Can you make, in another verse, can you make the deaf hear, or guide the blind, or those who are clearly astray? And another verse says, indeed, it is not the eyes that are blind, but it is the hearts within the chests. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says further that, can the one who knows that your Lord's revelation to you, O Prophet, is the truth, be like the one who is blind? Only those with understanding will take heed. So here he's laying the groundwork for the understanding that this thing, the inner sight, the basira, is something that is within ourselves that allows us to understand the truth, allows us to understand the signs and the revelation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then he further talks about the impact of looking at forbidden things. And this is not just, he does mention, the forbidden things, looking at, those people or those things that we're not supposed to look at. But sometimes what we don't think about when we're thinking about sight, using our sight in an inappropriate way, is the way that we look at each other, right? So looking at our brother, our fellow Muslims, with scorn or disdain or hatred in our heart, right? Looking at that person with like a scornful way, right? That sows discord in society. It sows distrust amongst people, right? You can, even if that person comes to you with like, normal looking face, they're stoic, or maybe they're smiling, you can tell when that person's not being sincere with you because of that sight that they have and the way that they're looking at you inwardly. And then he also talks about in the chapter after it, how sight can also be used similarly in a way that is beneficial to man, right? Is that you look to your brother, you look to your fellow Muslim with mercy, love, and reverence. That when you're interacting with people, a good way to use your sight is that when you look at them, have good feelings about them, have good opinions of them. But then there's this hadith that is narrated by Al-Bayhaqi and Shu'ab al-Iman, where the author says that whoever seeks, the Prophet is reported that the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever seeks out the flaws of his Muslim brother, Allah seeks out his flaws and exposes him, even if he is in the privacy of his own home. Authenticity of this, I'm not really sure, but it is in this book and it is quoted here. You can look into it yourself, but kind of the point being that we shouldn't look towards each other's faults, right? You shouldn't be the nosy neighbor that tries to see what the other person is doing. And even though, you're not physically, might not be looking or whatever, using your sight, but it's something that impacts your inwardness. And then also, he mentions, looking at those things with desire, lustfulness, that, also darken the heart and cause issues. He cites this verse of the Quran where it says, "O Prophet, tell the believing men to lower their gaze and guard their chastity that is pure for them. Allah is all aware of what they do." And so, this alludes to the thing that, we should be careful of what we look at. It's easier said than done these days, but, it's worth the effort, and it's something that we should be pretty strict about because it is quite damaging for ourselves. The Prophet ﷺ is also noted to have said, is narrated by Muslim in Kitab al-Bir. The Prophet ﷺ said, "It is enough evil for a person to look down on his Muslim brother." Right? And the author says he taught us to recognize the wisdom in the creation of all things, whether it be plants, animals, or inanimate objects. The Prophet ﷺ commanded us to witness the wisdom in its creation, and that by doing so we no longer look at others with disdain. To look down on others is an internal flaw that scars our inner sight and harms us. And so he kind of carries on and forwards and says, kind of gives an understanding that we should make an effort to rectify our sight. That whether that sight is looking at another person in a good way rather than in a bad way, or looking at those things that are permissible and pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rather than those things that are impermissible and displeasing to Allah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us of those who are good stewards of our eyesight. That way we can use our sight in a way that is pleasing to Him. This is the last Khtirah in this series as I am moving, so this is kind of my farewell to you all, inshallah. By this weekend I'll be leaving this community. It's been a pleasure to be here. Please make dua for me and my family. And I really hope that this community continues to thrive and flourish and is a beacon of light for the Ummah carrying forward, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Make sure you come and visit us.
Inshallah.